this is up a little bit louder. I'd like to welcome everybody here today for the House Public Safety Homeland Security meeting. We're here today to carry on the process, House Bill 875. Before we start, I believe we need to have devotion. Reverend Griffin, would you be kind enough to say a prayer over this meeting? Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me just make a couple of comments today. A lot of y'all who may have been here last year understood the rules that we had about these meetings. We know that the Second Amendment issues can get to be quite emotional. As I look out, I see a lot of people who are against this proposition. I see some who are extremely for the proposition, but they're against certain parts of it. You know, quite frankly, when you're dealing with Second Amendment rights, it's almost like being a Baptist. You just can't please everybody. But we have a piece of handiwork here. It is a committee we'll be working. The committee will be working from the substitute, the House Bill 875, LC 410171S. The author will present this bill and the substitute in its entirety. I have asked him if he would to go through it section by section, page by page for the benefit of the committee, so that you can make notes to know what each section is. There's probably, I'm guessing, 12 or 13 different issues that will be addressed in this substitute. Quite frankly, a lot of the issues in here are the same issues that was dealt with last year in House Bill 512, in House Bill 512 and Senate Bill 101, and a lot of that didn't change. There was a little bit of cleanup language on some of these different issues. And what we'll do today is, after the author has presented the bill and asked and answered questions to the committee members, then we're going to take testimony from folks who would like to speak. What I would ask is, out of the sake of time, because of redundancy, if you have heard someone say the same thing as how you wish to express it, please just sort of cut it shorter where we can get out of here before midnight. I will tell you, tomorrow afternoon we will resume these hearings tomorrow on this and another issue tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock in room 606 tomorrow. So, that being said, I think that they have tried to get the air cut on. So anyway, we have sent word that we need some air, or to step it up a little bit. That being said, Representative Jaspers, if you would.
Thank you, committee. I hope you'll understand my not having a coat on. It's pretty hot up here, and I'm nervous too, as always. I appreciate y'all taking the time in a busy week. I know this is budget week, and we're all working on the budgets, and that's important. But this is also an important issue. And I look forward to your thoughtful questions and your insight into this bill. This bill, for the most part, is a license bill. It's a license for the Georgia weapons carry license, and as we go through this bill, it'll be defined to you, and you'll see why. The Second Amendment's pretty clear, and over the years we have infringed upon people's rights to carry a weapon for one reason or another. This bill and 2 others before them correct this. Understand what a license is. Make sure you're on the same page. You have to be over 21, apply through the probate judge, you have your background check, and also a mental health screen. And then the judge should give you a license if you do qualify. So it's good Georgians. I emphasize that over and over again when I'm speaking about this. We're talking about good Georgians who follow the rules. As always, the bad Georgians don't care that we're in this room today, that we're speaking on this subject. They want to do us harm. In my local paper the other day, I wrote an article for them. It'll be in next week. And I said, it's a dangerous world out there. And there are people that want to harm us. They don't care what we think is right. And these acts of violence take place in seconds. And they can change your life or someone's life forever. And I love my law enforcement folks, and they know it. And I appreciate their duty and commitment to safety. But they can't be everywhere. But the bad guys are. An example I used at my house the other night was, consider walking, day or night, anywhere. You're threatened by an individual who has a weapon. Someone sees this, they call 911. That's great. What happens? Can you run? Can you get away? Maybe you can't. That person has a weapon. Well, time ticks by. 10 minutes. You hear the blue lights finally. We could sit here in silence right now and think about all the things that could happen to you. To your family, your daughter, anyone. It's horrible until law enforcement arrives. But this happens every day in our great state, even on college campuses like Tech, the 2 armed robberies last week. Those folks who have a clear sense of responsibility for their own protection of their family and their friends have a license. They have a sense of personal responsibility not to be a victim. This Bill 875 gives those who want to take this responsibility a better opportunity to do so. With that, I'll start on our bill. We'll try to move through. I won't move through quickly, committee. I'll give you time. I kind of broke it down. I just got it as you did. I try to get the line. So let's turn over to line 52. This is a very simple addition that came from Senate Bill 101, saying that a housing authority cannot say as part of living in public housing as a resident that you cannot have a weapon. I think you think about that. These homes, these apartments are their homes. Just like there's no infringement upon your ability to keep a weapon in your home. There will not be in a public housing. Let's turn to line 56. Just down the page. But this is that one does not have to be a licensee. Hang on just a second while you get on line 56. So one does not have to be a licensee to defend themselves or others, will have the same immunity that a license holder has from criminal prosecution in the case of the use of deadly force. Still, if there is a violation of the law for the use of force, you can and will be charged as you should be. But as far as self-defense goes, there should not be a difference between someone with a license and without a license. Let's turn over to the next page to section 1.4. If you look down through that section, you'll see the word private underlined many times. And that's where we're really making sure that the people that have private property, that we enforce that it is private property. And if you look down on line 70, it gives the private property owner, as it says, the right to exclude or eject a person possession of a weapon longer on their private property. This will come into play in just a few minutes later on in the bill. But it really makes it clear as you as the owner of private property can eject or exclude someone that's on your property quickly. And if they don't, like it says the next on line 71, that's where a criminal trespass statute is linked to that. So you can have the sheriff come, police, whomever to help you move it. Okay, let's move on down to line 82. It's on the same page. Change the definition on the courthouse to add the, in parentheses, as you'll see, or underlined, in a portion of. court portions of a building are still off limits. No question about this change as it addresses that. In today's modern world, there are all sorts of courts scattered in private and government buildings, and current law makes them all totally off limits. This is about allowing the Georgia weapons licensed citizen the ability to carry what they feel they may need to. In an area where there is no security, the license holder is in a position not to be able to protect themselves or others. We should not be afraid of citizens as those who are doing what to do this harm care not. A misdemeanor, as the current will not stop them. Let's turn over to line 106. Okay, we're removing in a place of worship and bars from the unauthorized location. Government should not be into controlling what takes place on private property. This will simply mean a church, a bar is private property. They can choose to do what they want. It goes back to that private property, back there in section the previous one, private property. They can exclude or remove you if they'd like to. Okay, let's run down, keep on going to line 143. There are other changes that are underlined, but I'm really hitting the top ones. These are the ones that are significant. Okay, now we're talking about government buildings. Okay. In the underlined area, the license holder will be able to carry into a government building that is not restricted or screened by security personnel during the hours the government building is open. Okay, the new part we've added this is if the license holder is found to have a weapon, they must immediately retreat without penalty. If you're not a license holder, it's a whole different story. In fact, the same with the current law. Remember, the license holder is not the threat. They follow the rules. Okay, we'll move on down to 194. So page 6. If you look at that little section of the two, you'll see an A, B, and a C. I'll go through the A, B, and C separately, so we'll make them clear. Okay, in the A, we're restating that the gun-free zone, public and private K-12 and private post-secondary is still a misdemeanor, as it is today. We're just restating that because in B, we're saying on public post-secondary, that definition is right there on line 200 of technical schools, vocational schools, colleges, etc. A licensee, if found with a weapon there, will not be arrested. They're fined $100. If you look at C, no license holder, it's a felony. So I think it's tougher, absolutely, than where it is now. Just look on as we move across to line 341. And this is just a simple change in what convicted means, that if you have went through the first offender requirements, you will be able to get a license. I think that's very good there. Let's keep on going to 347 on the next page at the very top on 11. And that section down to 353 is changing. That will allow our young men and women who are under 21 who have been honorably discharged to receive a license. Okay, and that connects to something on the very last page of this bill, where we allow those young men, women, to be able to work in security business. With the training they have, they'll be able to work in security. I think that's a good opportunity for their employment. We move on down to 401. Okay, we're in here. These are people that are prohibited from having a license. And we've added these two in here. As you'll see, any person who has been adjudicated mentally incompetent to stand trial or similarly adjudicated not guilty by reason of insanity at the time of the trial. So they're on a federal prohibition list. We're just adding it to our list also. Okay, let's go to line 334. Ahead of myself, I think. Oh, 430. I can't type. Excuse me, I really meant to say line 422. I can't type. So you'll find this at the top of page 13. Fingerprinting. Your fingerprints don't change. And so upon renewal or temporary renewal license, those applicants who are seeking those renewals will not have to be re-fingerprinted. And that's a save. I think that saves them. Just doesn't come to me right now how much it saves them. $35, $45. It's a good deal. Okay. 562. As you turn those pages, these are just old language that are cleaning up the license requirement by legislative council. We're going to add those. This part may seem like common sense to some of us but what this part really does, it spells out the process that the applicant can use to appeal a license being denied. It's very clear, and I think it's just a nice addition for those who do read the law. It gives them an opportunity and method to do that. Turn the page to 570. It says no database shall be created for licensees and their information. And I think you remember last year, I think we were here talking one time, that a group did this and identified everyone in some Pennsylvania towns that had a license. Put them on a map. And but I'm just curious if crime went up in those homes that were not listed. And I'm sure they didn't on the ones that were listed. But it will prohibit the creation of a database. On 573, we're letting the probate judge make sure he can verify the legitimacy of the license that has been done. And he keeps records on that there in his office. Because this will relate to just a few minutes where we'll talk about a license holder must now keep the license on their body if they're with weapons. And so he'll be able to check if somebody needs to. Let's look at section 1.8. So we're kind of getting out of the license business now. You know, prior to now, this has all been about license, where you can carry, what, and all that good stuff. Now this is from Chairman Battles, House Bill 35. It was pre-filed last year. It's greatly discussed by this committee and approved on. It simply gives the Board of Education in the county the voluntary option to designate one or more employees to possess a weapon in a school safety zone. This is well thought out. It's not mandated. And I think if you take time to read it, you'll agree. Very well done. This adds a level of security for some school systems. Turn to line 637. It's on page 19. So this is language from Chairman Powell's House Bill 356. And if you'll notice from the bill you got the other day to this sub, we've kind of clarified it. If you'll look in A, essentially saying that no person shall knowingly enter, long list, of spaces connected to an airport. If they do, two things can happen. B, the person is not a license holder will be guilty of a misdemeanor. It clarifies the penalty, which is not clear now. However, if it's a license holder, if they leave immediately, they're not going to be guilty
do appreciate the position that y'all take as Christian ministers. You know, and I had said at the beginning of these hearings that this is a very difficult subject matter. We have a lot of people who, because of that Christian compassion, they naturally have a problem with a weapon or a gun in its personification. But you know, weapons, those of us who are sworn, we're sworn to uphold the Constitution. And the Second Amendment of the Constitution is pretty clear. And it's clear for various reasons. And I know that people have changed over the last 225 years or so. And they have concerns and they try to reinterpret and revise the meaning and the causes and such. But you know, the Constitution is pretty endearing. It works if we let it work, just like the 10th Amendment on private property rights works, just like the constitutional provision about freedom of religion. You know, I'm glad y'all would come forward. And you know, I go back to something I'd said last year. I wish that I could say that in my lifetime that we wouldn't see any gun violence. Quite frankly, I wish we would. But we don't live in a perfect world. And that's quite the reason that we have the Second Amendment. And hopefully we can find something that will work and will restore some kind of confidence, or we may not make anybody mad. I mean, we might not make anybody happy, and if we don't, pray for all of us. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's see. Do we have anyone else from the ministerial community? Yes, ma'am, and you are? You signed up, or did I just miss you?
I believe I'm signed up. Yes.
All right, go right ahead.
Well, and first just want to thank all of you for your service to all of us in Georgia. I'm not a politician. I'm a pastor, so I want to speak just from a pastoral perspective this afternoon. And any of you who are parts of a community of faith know that the ways of faith and the ways of God are often mysterious, life-giving, challenging, downright confounding, and aren't always immediately understandable, even for people of faith. And of course, we're always on the way with God, and on the way in our faith life with God. This bill would ask people of faith, worshipers, to, in part, to place our trust in our own ability to protect ourselves, to save ourselves, if necessary. But the tenets of faith itself call us to place our ultimate faith in God to protect and to save. And now, does that make sense? Not to everybody, but it is at the heart of our faith. Inherent in this bill is an assumption, it's an assumed suspicion of those around us. It calls us almost to suspect the stranger, the other, because not everybody can be trusted, and I certainly understand that. But at the heart of our faith is God's call to regard the neighbor, the stranger, the other, including the enemy, not with suspicion, but with love and with compassion, not to arm ourselves against each other, but to open ourselves to each other. Is there risk? Well, love always involves risk, whether it's loving your family or loving the enemy. Does it make sense to love the enemy? Not at all, but then God didn't ask my opinion. And inherent in our faith is the call to open ourselves, not to arm ourselves. This bill feels like a significant intrusion into the faith practices of religious communities all over Georgia, of every faith tradition. This morning we were asked a question, a very fair question, by a member of the press. Earlier there were a gathering of clergy to speak about this, and the question was this. She said, and it was fair. She said, if there's an opt-out provision in the bill, couldn't your church or synagogue or mosque simply call a meeting, get together, and let the congregation vote themselves on whether or not they want to allow folks with weapons in? And you know, on the surface, that seems like a really reasonable solution. Call a vote, see what the will of the people is. And I mean, I'm a Baptist pastor, and Baptists love to vote. We'll vote on the wattage in the light bulbs in the sanctuary if you give us a chance. But we contend that congregations shouldn't be placed in the position of needing to have a vote. That if we have a vote on whether or not to have arms inside a house of worship, it should be because we feel led by God to do so, not because the government is forcing us to do so. And so for many reasons, other than just this, we ask you, we urge you to let this bill stop. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question is, do you feel led by God to have guns in your houses of worship? All right, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to say, I'm Frank Mulcahy. I'm Executive Director of the Georgia Catholic Conference. I represent the Catholic bishops of Georgia. We have been proud to be associated with our colleagues here from the Temple, from the Presbyterian Church, and other churches in Georgia. I'll try to be brief and honor your request not to be duplicative. Mr. Chairman, I have a statement that was prepared by the bishops, and I'll be don't have copies for everyone, but I'll be happy to share them with you. Not read them to you. But I would like to go beyond, and I will be happy to continue the discussion of guns in houses of worship. But I wanted to go a little bit beyond that, because our position is that as Catholic Christians, we try to address the entire common good, those things which we think affect the common good. And we think that this bill needs some work to really address the common good. As I said, we talked about guns in houses of worship, but we do have additional concerns that this bill is opening up the availability of weapons to a larger segment of the community, and maybe to people who shouldn't have them. We're fully cognizant of the Second Amendment, and we support the Constitution. The author suggested that the key to this is the licensing, that the licensing of a weapon gives rights to an individual to do a lot of things, and basically to carry a weapon almost anywhere. I don't think that is entirely the position that we would want to see taken. And the reason for that is there was a certain standard to which an individual must meet in order to be approved by the probate judge to carry a weapon. That standard ignores a lot of people who probably should not be carrying weapons in certain situations. And I think one of the examples is our college campuses, where we entrust those who send children to state colleges, entrust our children to the state of Georgia to live on a campus. And I think there's a duty of the state of Georgia to provide protection to those children. And the situation I would come up with would be a student who was assigned to a dorm to live in a dorm, even in a room, with someone who is licensed to carry a weapon but may be unstable, maybe not convicted, but unstable, someone who may be using drugs, using marijuana, a topic that's come up lately, or otherwise might be the type of individual you would want your child living with, but yet the state assigns these children to live together. They live in very close quarters. They live in emotional situations, in sports and other things. These are the areas where I think that we're offering guns too freely, Mr. Chairman.
You do understand that campus carry is not in this bill.
I understand that campus carry certainly as last year, was not in there. It seems to us that the provision that's in the bill this year, which, as I understand it, makes it a misdemeanor, but with a very low fine, makes it a little too easy, in our opinion, to allowing children to be exposed to people living in close quarters, in gyms, in emotional events like sporting events, without the protection, more protection than simply a license. And I would say the same thing is true of churches. We allow people to exercise their First Amendment rights to worship. We give them a protection, and now we're taking away a protection that has been in existence for whatever reason for 100 years. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, that would be my approach, and I appreciate your comments. Would answer any questions.
See no question?
No question. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you so much, and we appreciate you taking time to come. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Have you signed up yet, or? Boy, just come on up.
Mr. Chairman and other members of the committee, I thought it was important for me to be here along with other members of the coalition to state in very clear terms that we are opposed to this bill that argues that more guns held by more people in more places somehow makes our state safer. There are a number of issues going on that face this state. We have a session that's shorter than usual this year. And as I move around the state, talk to other pastors, priests, rabbis, imams, laypersons, they are discussing a number of issues and things that they'd like to see the representatives of the people get done. Nowhere in the conversation does this issue come up. No one is saying to us and the people that I'm connected to that what we need is the ability to have guns in houses of worship. And so we reject this bill. It does not solve a problem. I'm not certain what problem has been presented that somehow needs to be solved by this piece of legislation. I do not speak in abstract or theoretical terms. As pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, I represent a people who have known violence in our own sanctuary. Dr. King, of course, was a victim of gun violence, but so was his mother, who was shot and killed while playing the organ in our church one Sunday morning, singing the Lord's Prayer, where we say, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." She lost her life to the deranged violence of a young man who was mentally unstable and needed care. And he had more access to a gun than he did to mental health care. 40 years later, that problem is exacerbated by more guns and more dangerous guns. And what we need the representatives of the people to do is to spend your time helping us to figure out how the 600,000 Georgians who are without health care can get access to health care and mental health care. I think it sends a terrible message to the people of this state, and it sends a terrible message to the nation for Georgia to lead in this way. We do not want to be distinctive in this way. We do not want our sanctuaries and the environment of our sanctuaries to be further discombobulated and confused by the presence of guns. All of us, I know, working in an urban congregation, mentally unstable people are in my church all the time. And we're glad that it's a good place to be. But we don't need the confusion of having to figure out whether someone should have a gun or not. After Mama King was killed, there were those who said, well, maybe we need more people armed. So some of the deacons of our church began to arm themselves. And, one too many times someone dropped their gun. And Martin Luther King Sr., Daddy King, the pastor of the church at that time, said enough is enough. And so we decided, having witnessed violence in our sanctuary, we decided decades ago that this was not a good idea. We experienced this experiment that's being forced upon us at this time. And so I would ask that you would consider this, that you would hear the 72% of Georgians who are saying we don't need guns in churches, and the 78% of Georgians who are saying we do not need them in our college campuses. I thank you so much for your time. I think we need to hear the words of Dr. King, who said that a society where we say an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. We have the data. We have the research. I know this is a very emotional issue. People have lots of opinions. We're not anti-gun. We're entitled to our own opinions. We're not entitled to our own facts. And it's demonstrated and clear that more guns make us less safe and not more safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reverend. All right. Let's see here. Charles Hendricks. If I might ask, we're really running pretty close to time. If we might could sort of move with it.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity of the election today. My name is Charles Hendricks Jr. I'm a resident of Pickens County. I was medically retired from the U.S. Army in 1992 after more than 20 years of active service. The Medical Relief Board determined that I was no longer fit to remain on active duty because of the time limit. I served my country with honor and dignity. Do it all again. My field of expertise was in ammunition and explosives. After retirement, I worked in Saudi Arabia as principal advisor, weapons and munitions to the Directorate of Weapons and Ammunition, Saudi Arabian National Guard. I also worked at the National Training Center, Fort Owen, California, as assistant supervisor of field ammunition supply point. Our responsibilities have included training units preparing to deploy to the Middle East in ammunition and explosive field operations. I am opposed to passage of HB 875. Various individuals and special interest groups have been successful at giving the impression this issue is about the Second Amendment. I don't agree. I think this issue is about public safety. Others are determined to make it a political party issue. It is not about Democrats versus Republicans, liberals versus conservatives. It is not about the Second Amendment. I've heard the claim that gun-free zones are targeted because they are gun-free and offer the least resistance somebody wants to kill. Evidence is contrary. An in-depth analysis from Mayors Against Illegal Guns found that fewer than 1/4 of mass shootings in public spaces from January of 2009 through January of this year occurred in gun-free zones. Instead, most gunmen choose their killing sites because they have a personal connection. Their workplace or their school, something is happening. There is no evidence of any mass shooter specifically selecting his location based on its likelihood of being gun-free. Research specialists have studied this and said this time and time again. And I will quote from Daniel Webster out of Johns Hopkins University. Schools might be a likely target because that is where a mass of people congregate, and those people involve a lot of troubled adolescents who may harbor bad feelings toward the people who bullied them, who are unfair to them, etc. The shooters in these instances didn't say, hey, I'll find a gun-free zone where I can shoot a lot of people. No, they went to place for reasons wholly unrelated to gun-free zones. Among the 62 mass shootings over the last 30 years that were studied, not a single case includes evidence that the killer chose a target because guns were banned. Not one. Regardless how many times people make the claim, there is no evidence to support it. 36 of the mass shooters took their own life at the scene or close to the scene. I don't think they were concerned with whether there were guns or not. I fail to understand how any person could believe the claim that they targeted schools because it was the safest place to take their own life. Secondly, if more guns and access to more guns is the answer to curbing shooting sprees, then why haven't more guns curbed shooting sprees? Nearly 100 states have loosened gun restrictions in the past 4 years. Yet 2012 was the worst year for mass shootings in recent history. Loosening current restrictions and reducing the punishment for violating this proposed law from a criminal offense to civil offense in some cases is not a solution to reducing gun violence. It encourages it. There is something wrong when I get the picture in my head that somebody that runs a red stop sign is probably going to get more of a penalty than somebody carrying a gun because he had a license even though he knew he wasn't supposed to carry it anymore. There is no clause in this bill that suspends a concealed carry license for carrying a gun in a restricted zone. I can only imagine why. I do not believe there is a single person in support of this proposal that believes allowing people to carry a gun in bars will make the public safer from gun violence. Opt-in or otherwise, guns should not be allowed in bars if public safety and logic are applied. I could tell you some horror stories about my own experience in bars, but we don't have the time for that. Suffice it to say, if guns had been allowed to be carried in some of the bars I've been in, and some of the altercations I've been in, there is no question I would either not be here or some of the people I had problems with would not be here. No question in my mind. Most of the time, even though I knew what the consequences were of my actions, they didn't apply. Once you put alcohol in your body, you are no longer responsible. I don't care how long you've been responsible. It changes people. I brushed aside my concerns when I had been drinking. I didn't care whether I hurt someone. It didn't matter whether my military career would be over. The alcohol did my talking. I no longer drink. But how many other people are going to do like I did? The argument that it is a constitutional right to bear arms is the truth. It is also a truth that there are limits to every right defined in the Bill of Rights in our Constitution. Those limits are normally determined as a result of thoughtful and objective review of the law and applying logic and common sense. Limiting where guns can be carried is not infringing on the Second Amendment. I don't care how many times it's been that. That issue has been decided by the Supreme Court already. As a society, we take action to protect people. That's what we do as a society. We don't intentionally put them in harm's way. We took action to reduce drinking and driving because it was a danger to others. We have taken steps to make automobiles safer to save lives. We have put in place a screening system to try to make air travel safe. That is what we do as a civilized society. We try to make people safer, not put them in harm's way. Amendments are an excuse for some to disregard public safety and make it secondary. I am urging this committee to make public safety paramount. Paramount, not secondary. I ask partisan loyalty be put aside and logic applied, and do not vote in favor of this legislation. It will not make people safer from gun violence. It will increase the likelihood they will become victims of gun violence. Public safety is as important as the Second Amendment. The citizens of Georgia recognize this as a public safety issue. I ask this committee to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Elsie Stallman. Elise, I'm sorry.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'll move this down a little bit. My name is Elise Stallman. I'm a concerned citizen from Brookhaven, and I'm here to speak to the airport piece of this legislation. Now, I understand that since the last draft that I saw, which was dropped last week, there have been some changes on that, and I want a clarification. Is it true now that intent's been removed and that a concealed carry licensed person has a duty to retreat at an airport and non-licensed is still a misdemeanor? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. To me, that's even worse than the way the bill was to begin with, because it's still decriminalizing airport carry past security. It goes on to state that this law nullifies any county, municipality, or other jurisdiction within the state. Hartsville-Jackson, the world's busiest airport, ranks as the top U.S. airport for gun confiscations already, and I have statistics from 2012 if anybody wants to see that. Do we really want to encourage more guns, burdening more TSA screeners? Their chief, John Pistoli, interesting, his name is Pistol with an E at the end, in a January 30th LA Times article, rejected the idea of arming TSA agents. Apparently, he's aware of the danger of shootouts in crowded public places, and I, for one, agree with him. And I have the article available if anybody wants to see it. So this portion of the bill is for the convenience of those who forget they have a gun with them. I ask you, should those who are irresponsible enough to forget they have a gun on them really have a concealed carry permit? I could continue elaborating on the hideous reputation our state will carry and how terrible it will be for commerce and tourism in Georgia should this legislation go through. But I'm actually here to honor the memory of my cousin, Eric Adam Stallman. Whose family was one of thousands inconvenienced on September 11, 2001. And they were brought down with the lesser weapons of box cutters. We know that terrorists are willing to sacrifice their own lives to make us suffer. Imagine when word reaches them that this legislation is passed. To them, concealed carry through a world-class airport would be well worth the risk to commit hijack and mass murder. It's well documented that terrorists worldwide know how easy it is to obtain weapons in the U.S. thanks to U.S.-born al-Qaeda operative Adam Gadahn. If anybody wants to look him up, it's spelled G-A-D-A-H-N, and others who have YouTubes out about how easy it is to get guns without background checks. Now we're going to encourage them further by decriminalizing guns in airports? And for what? The convenience of people who can't remember they have weapons on them? What about the inconvenience of Eric's widow and 2 young children who are now college age? These 2 young children whose father never got to see his son win championship hockey games, or his daughter graduate high school with honors and go to college majoring in political science. Needless to say, as the world's busiest airport, a national and international hub, you're not just endangering Georgians who you're elected to serve, but the entire world, air travelers and non-travelers. That sunny September morning, Eric called his wife Blanca from his office at the World Trade Center, as he did at 8:30 every morning, to tell her he loved her and wish her a wonderful day. It was the last time she would hear his voice. Sorry. His family and so many others suffered a loss for which there will never be closure. I beg you, distinguished House members, to think of your own loved ones as you debate this portion and the entirety of 875. And please vote your conscience, not your campaign finance and endorsements. And I have 3 other little comments. I have 3 other quick comments from what I've heard, okay? All right. First of all, and the gentleman left, concealed carry permits in Georgia do not require training. And I think he was mistaken on his thinking that training was required, and you all know that. Number 2, a man, and this is to the folks who talk about the good people that have the concealed carry licenses. I could be wrong, but I believe the man who shot the man for texting in Florida had a concealed carry license. He was a retired cop. Was he a good man for killing that man? I don't think so. And as to the Second Amendment, I don't know about the militia part, but in the 27 words of the Second Amendment, it says a well-regulated militia. not unregulated private property. I want to thank you for hearing me out, and if anybody needs information.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any questions?
We have former Representative Ellie Dobbs. Ellie, do you think you could hold it a little bit closer? Thank you so much.
First, I want to thank you so much for allowing all of us to come today. And ladies and gentlemen of this committee, there are not too many of you left. And I'm happy to be back in this room and seeing all of my friends. And I hope that you will listen to what I have to say. I am here as just a concerned citizen. And let me start out by saying that the authors of this bill are my friends, and they are all good people. And all of the folks in the audience that are on the pro-gun side are all good folks. And so this is not an issue of good folks against bad folks. This is an issue about practicality and what is going to keep our Georgians safest. And I'd also like to say that I come from a home where members of my family have licenses to carry a gun. We have guns in my home. And while I was on the Natural Resources Committee, I went to a lot of target shooting ranges and enjoyed it. And so this is not an issue about having a gun or not having a gun. This is about where guns should be allowed and where are we going to keep our citizens the safest. And I just want to start out by just quoting a few facts, because I know most of you have heard these many times, but Georgia exceeds the national average in gun ownership and gun violence. In Georgia, we had over 11,000 people were killed by gun violence in Georgia between 2001 and 2010. And I would like to know and ask you all, do you know how many of the people who shot those folks, how many of those people had licenses to carry? Does anybody know? We do not know, because we're not allowed to gather that information. So the question is, how do we know what makes us safe in Georgia? Because we can't gather the facts that we need. But in addition to that, 77 children and teens died as a result of gun violence in 2010. And in 2011, Georgia had the third highest incidence of robberies with a gun, almost double the national average, even though we have more guns in Georgia than most other states. In 2013, the CDC found that Georgia gun murder rate was 27% above the national average. Georgia had one of the highest rates in gun exports in the country. We have a lot of gun manufacturers here in Georgia. I want you to know that. And in addition, guns hurt our most vulnerable children and our teens. During 2008 and 9, more preschoolers died of the result of gun violence than law enforcement personnel died in the line of duty. And we saw a lot of law enforcement officers here. And then during 2008 and 9, more children and teens, 5,740 died from gun violence, which was more than the military personnel who were killed during the entire Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Where are these statistics coming from? Do we see them in our daily newspapers? Do we read about it? Do we know that? We don't know all these things. And what I want to also say is that I really feel that most Georgians don't know these statistics. Most people aren't reading the paper anymore. Most Georgians aren't listening to what is being said here in this committee hearing. But the one thing we do know is that the majority of Georgians are not in favor of this bill. And being a legislator, like all of you, I know how difficult it is to weigh what the folks in South Georgia want versus what the folks in North Georgia want versus what the folks in Atlanta want. But we need to consider all of them. We need to consider not only the rural areas, but also the urban areas. We need to consider all Georgians. And I will repeat what some of the folks said that testified earlier. 78% of Georgians do not want guns in schools. 72% do not want guns in houses of worship. So there is a silent majority of Georgians out there who have not spoken but need to speak up, because this body, the legislature of the state of Georgia, is here to represent all of Georgians, not just a minority few, and not just those of your district. When you are here representing your district here in Georgia, you are representing not only those folks from your counties and your cities, but also the entire state of Georgia and what is best. Now, I won't go further with all the statistics, although I would love to, but I do want to just point out a few problems with the practicality of this bill. I will say, when I looked at this bill, I have not had a chance to read it and study it, because you know how complex it is. And I respect the authors of the bill for writing this bill, because I know how difficult it was. But this opt-in, opt-out thing, the way the law in Georgia is now, it's very simple, and everybody understands it. It's on the back of the license, your license that you have when you get a license to carry. It basically says that when a lot of people gather in a place, guns should not be allowed. It is too easy for someone to come in and shoot up the entire place, especially with these automatic and semi-automatic weapons that we now have. And that's why they don't allow guns in places like the Georgia Dome, or the University of Georgia football games, or the Super Bowl. They don't allow them there. And it's the same reason why, when our forefathers wrote the laws that we are now getting ready to change, they did not want guns in government buildings, in courthouses, in schools, in churches, in places where people gather. And most Georgians know that now. But the problem is, when you start putting this opt-in, opt-out, nobody's going to know which churches you can bring guns in, which churches you can't bring guns in, where can you go, which schools allow guns, which schools don't. It's going to be very, very confusing. And are you going to have every single church that doesn't want guns to have a place where people have to put their purses and put all their keys as you walk in to make sure that they don't have a gun? Are you going to have to put a big sign out front of all the churches that says no guns allowed? Last week we went through some embarrassing situations here in Georgia. Do we really want on the front page of the AJC, Georgia, churches, no guns allowed? I can see the comics already. I think we need to think about the big picture. And I think this bill has some very good things in it. I wouldn't throw out the whole bill. But this bill is so comprehensive. I can't believe we're trying to take this up in the last few weeks of this very short session. It has got so much complexity. There are so many issues. We talked about the airport issues, the church issues, the college issues, the decriminalization of a lot of this stuff. If you had lawyers involved, they would pick this thing apart. And we know how difficult it is to pass a bill, and it is extremely difficult to go back and fix a bill. Do we want to put the effort into this? Do we want to fight the lawsuits that are going to come up because of this? We're talking about the difference between the right to religion and then the Second Amendment. There's all kinds of issues in this bill that haven't been vetted. This was just dropped on Monday. So in conclusion, I would like to just say that we don't need more access to more guns. What we need are more access to mental health programs, and we need more access to training people to use guns. And this body represents all of the Georgians, as I said. Please think about the silent majority who has said that they do not want this bill the way it's drafted now. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Allie.
Okay, thank you all. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Oh, do we have anyone in here who can address the committee in less than 5 minutes? Have you signed up? And you are? Come on up here, Jeff.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, My name is Jeff Bailey. I'm a policy analyst with the National Association for Gun Rights and a master's candidate in professional counseling. On behalf of NAGR's more than 250,000 members and supporters in Georgia, I've come here to urge the committee to remove all language expanding which mental health records are reported to GCIC, specifically what was previously lines 750 through 759, as well as section 1-14. Mental health has become the vehicle by which those who would prefer to ban all guns are attempting to incrementally restrict ownership that they can't ban outright. It's a red herring, and a very dangerous red herring. According to the CDC, with almost half of all Americans suffering with mental illness of some form at some point in their lives, this is not an insignificant issue. Some have called for an active database of all mentally ill individuals in the country be maintained by the government as a means to decrease violence. Even if such a database were to be effective, which is a highly dubious assumption, it would destroy the idea of due process. Language like that found in 750 through 759 of the previous version of House Bill 875 has been appearing all across the country. The common theme we've seen in state legislatures is that the proposed legislation increases the number of people whose information is funneled without due process into the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, a database from which removal is virtually impossible. The National Association for Gun Rights asks the committee to respect not only the gun rights, but the due process rights of their constituents by stripping all mental health language from Bill 875. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that can be asked.
What is your group again?
National Association for Gun Rights.
Mr. Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since you're referring to a different version, can somebody tell the members of the committee what the current lines are so that we can know what you're talking about?
Yes, the current version, the lines that I had issue with were those that referred to involuntary treatment, which has been changed to involuntary hospitalization. This is under section 1-13 of the previous bill, which I believe is section 1-12 of the current bill. The problem is involuntary hospitalization is just as vague under Georgia statute as involuntary commitment. It can easily capture those who are committed under outpatient circumstances, which means that a judge thinks you are such a danger that you have to go and talk to someone once a month. You're still free to go and be part of the population. You're not enough of a danger that we actually have to remove you from the population at large. But we're going to strip you of your right to defend yourself and to choose how you'll defend yourself because you have to go and talk to someone.
Do you have concerns with subparagraph B, or is it just A?
I have no concerns with subparagraph B.
Okay, thank you.
So if I might ask, I mean, there was a couple of things in there that, I know that I was educated a good while back and heard the minister a while ago told me that he didn't even realize they used to have solid drive shafts under their car, and I said, gosh, I am a dinosaur, but involuntary commitment. When this bill was being drafted, the first look I had, I thought, I think I understand. When you say involuntary and being committed, that's being committed to a hospital. And it's in the and it's under the terms of a mental hospital. So, do we really, as somebody who is really that I've always considered myself pro Second Amendment person, but I got concerns in this world we're living in. Do we really need to have people who have problems to the point that they've had to be involuntarily committed or involuntarily hospitalized? Not the people who go get the Prozac that's readily available that I think half the country's on. But, I'm talking about folks who have a real mental condition. Do we really want to make those rights to the concealed weapon available to those people? Because my concern is a realistic concern that as much as I believe and I support the Second Amendment, I understand that things can change. And I see all of these folks, and let me tell you something, these are good folks out here. I adamantly disagree with them about Second Amendment rights. Quite frankly, I wonder how many people really read the bill, because they're so adamantly opposed to the Second Amendment. And I'd love to see that we did away with the guns. Ma'am, would you mind giving a little bit of respect? I've tried to let everybody else speak, and I'm talking to this gentleman. But you know, I understand that every time there's another event at a elementary school or some senseless shooting, that helps to erode our rights even more. Would you not agree with that?
If I may address a few points that you
Would
had.
you mind? Would you agree or not disagree?
Could you restate? I'm sorry, my train of thought.
Do you
was off.
think that every time that there's a senseless act of violence on a campus or in a school that has happened by someone who got a hold of a weapon because they were mentally challenged, that they had problems to the point that they had needed involuntarily commitment? They didn't realize they had a problem, but they did have. Do you think those people should have that? Should be able to get a weapon or a permit for weapons?
I think the due process rights guaranteed by the 14th Amendment are essential to the proper functioning of our society. If we allow outpatient commitments, which is codified in Georgia Code Section 37-3-81.1, subsection 2, outpatient commitment, which is a court instructing an individual to either undergo treatment or to simply take medication, that if that is sufficient to take someone's Second Amendment rights, we've destroyed the 14th Amendment as well. Now, have there been situations where those who were probably institutionalizable, those who could have been institutionalized on an inpatient basis, and as a result, our Second Amendment has suffered? Yes. In the words of my boss, there are those who will step over the graves of murdered children to push their agenda. He was speaking of Michael Bloomberg. What we are talking about here is definitions of mental health. Mental illness, you talk about those who have a serious mental problem. Mental illness is defined by the American Psychiatric Association. It is set forth in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, version 5, which just came out. They just added caffeine addiction withdrawal as a registered mental illness. We're not talking about just bipolar. We're not talking about just schizophrenia. Mental illness runs the gamut. And it is disingenuous and it is dangerous for us to say that mental illness is the cause of violence. Mental illness is something that millions of Americans suffer with. And if we continue to say that mental illness is the driver of violence, we will push those who need treatment underground. They won't seek it for fear of being further stigmatized. They'll avoid the treatment that would help them become better. As it is, mass shootings, the percentage of them that are perpetrated by those who are seriously mentally ill is minuscule. And quite frankly, there are groups who will think that the way we protect our Second Amendment is by cutting it up and giving away small parts of it. At the National Association for Gun Rights, we do not believe that. You defend something by defending it, not by parceling it out.
Mr. Alkin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to some of your comments on mental health, could you provide the committee with your professional background and educational background after high school?
Yes. I hold a undergraduate degree in German language and literature. I hold a master's degree of business administration in marketing strategy and research, and I'm currently working on a master's degree in professional counseling.
Any other questions? I'll ask just one question. Does your group, do y'all have this identifying language that would be acceptable to y'all? Or is there
I would
such
be
a
happy
language?
to speak with any member of the committee on working on language that would protect the rights of citizens.
And do you have this available?
I'm making myself available to anyone who wants to meet with me.
All right. Very good. Could you meet with Representative Jaspers and have him some language say
Absolutely.
tomorrow?
If he'd like to meet after this meeting, I'd be more than happy to sit down with him.
Very good. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right. All right. Mrs. Cole. Do we have a Mrs. Cole from the Moms Demand Action? Oh, I believe we remember you from last year. Very good.
There was about 5 of us here last year fighting what turned out to be HB 512, and I am so excited to see. I mean, I think we have like 40 or 50 people here. It's amazing. Somebody very well stated about the will of the people and the preferences of your constituents. I think that's an important message to take away from this meeting. Just a little background. I am Georgia chapter leader for Moms Demand Action Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense. We were created pattern after Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD, which was created to reduce drunk driving. Moms Demand Action was created to reduce gun violence. Okay? Just like MAD did not try to ban drinking, they didn't try to ban driving. It's not about the vehicle. It's not about alcohol. It's about creating common sense legislation around dangerous situations and dangerous places. So that's what we're about. Specifically on HB 875, our organization looks at all the policies from the perspective of parents raising families in America. The need to protect our children and loved ones is paramount to everything that we do. We understand our legislators' concern for the Second Amendment, and while we support a person's right to carry and own a firearm, we don't believe that permitting more guns in more places solves anything. It does increase the chance of accidental shootings or worse. We believe that most of HB 875 does nothing to promote personal safety for our families, schools, or society. We've already talked about the AJC polls that talk about what our Georgians believe about guns on campus and guns in churches. There have been many other polls by 11 Alive, WSB-TV. There's been multitude of polls that all say the same thing. Georgians are concerned about public safety. They want to reduce gun violence. We believe that HB 875 instead is taking many steps to dismantle gun-free zones. Now, the gun-free zones, most of these were put in place in the 1990s when the rate of gun violence was spiraling upwards. And if you look at the statistics, ever since the 1990s when these gun-free zones were put in place, gun homicides have gone down. We don't need to fix it, okay? It works. Let's keep it in place. There are claims made by some that guns increase safety and security. And I'm going to specifically address K through 12 schools. If security in our K through 12 schools is truly our main concern, then permitting guns in our schools is going in the wrong direction. We don't believe teachers or administrators should be put in the position of making split-second decisions they aren't trained to make. They are there to teach our children. That is what they are charged to do. Let them teach. Knowing when to pull the trigger is a hard call for our police officers and shouldn't be a decision made by a school employee. We have had 4 incidences in Georgia of school shootings just since Newtown. 4. Okay? 3 of those situations were when a child brought a gun into the school. Imagine what may have happened if an untrained teacher, and I know we've talked about training, but the training that's in the bill is minimal, with a gun had reacted to one of these situations. We've talked about Ronald, the McNair Elementary School. That was not
that was not taken care of by a person with a weapon. It was taken care of a caring, loving individual that was able to defuse the situation. Why are we trying to arm our teachers and cause more incidences where our children can be in more harm's way? Why aren't we enabling and focusing instead on supporting those employees of our schools that are responsible for identifying troubled children, that are responsible for reaching out to them? Why aren't we giving more resources to the SROs, which is our school resource officers? Why aren't we giving more resources to the school psychologists, which their budgets have been cut continually over the last few years? Okay. Those 3 incidences where children brought weapons to school, one, they might be brought about by many reasons. Maybe they wanted to show off. Maybe they wanted to solve a situation in a very bad way. What are we teaching them by bringing guns? We're teaching them that the way to solve a problem, is with a gun. That is not what we need to teach our children. Our schools should be places of nurturing and increased learning opportunities, not for putting weapons on display in the classroom. I want to also address the issue about the carrying weapons into our airport. As Alicia already mentioned, Hartsfield-Jackson is the busiest airport in the world, and introducing firearms into the equation, I don't think that makes anyone safer. We already have more guns confiscated in our airport than any others. This is where I bring my children when we go on vacation. This is where we go when we go on business. We need to make sure that these areas, these gun-free zones that are vulnerable areas, are protected. Okay? My son, who is 9 years old, knows he can't bring his Nerf guns in his carry-on. Okay? If someone is not responsible enough to remember that they are packing a loaded weapon, a firearm that can kill, maim, then they probably shouldn't be allowed to have a concealed carry permit. Okay? That maybe what we need to do is put more resources into more training for concealed carry permit holders. In fact, back to the HAC poll, the majority of Georgians want more training for concealed carry weapon holders. Our children's safety is our main goal, and HB 875 has sections that we do applaud. The parts of the bill dealing with mental health exceptions are a good first step. It's a step in the right direction. However, there's many more steps to be taken. If you look at the Law Center for gun violence, Georgia is actually ranked as one of the worst states in terms of fatal gaps, in terms of reporting into the background check system and making sure that all of the criminals, those that have been adjudicated by a judge as mentally incompetent, are in our database. We need to do much, much more, and we applaud you for taking that step, but we feel we need to do much more. Moms Demand Action has over 140,000 members. Last year, we began after Sandy Hook. We were here with just a few members. We've grown about 500% over the last year because we represent moms who care about public safety, and we will keep growing. We're young, but we're going to keep fighting because this is about public safety. We call on our state representatives to vote no on HB 875 as it is today, and on Governor Steele to veto it should it make it to his desk. We also stand committed to turning back the damage that the proliferation of guns as a result of Georgia's lax gun laws has brought in our state and in our country. Thank you for your attention, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
We thank you for being here, and I see no questions.
Thank you.
Let's see. Sean Schubert. And feel free, if there's any of this that's redundant, that you feel free to trim it back as much as you can. John? We will be meeting for more testimony tomorrow. Well, you might as well get us while we're still here. Schubert.
My name is Shawn Schubert, and I am a domestic violence advocate and survivor. And I am listening to these laws. I'm actually trying to learn as I go, and I apologize because I'm very new at this. But I just don't feel like this law is going to protect the most innocent of victims at this point. You made a very good point a little while ago in this law. And again, you guys forgive me, I never did this before. I come here with a question wanting to know why we're making it easier to purchase and sell weapons when so many people are already manipulating the law. We have violent offenders and domestic violence abusers who are already manipulating the law. My ex-husband was allowed to make threats, point weapons, have a pistol in his pocket while intoxicated, threatening to kill people, and he was charged with a misdemeanor, and I'm actually looking to find exactly what he was charged with, but it didn't have anything to do with his right to carry a weapon. Well, he can't carry a weapon now because he is actually in jail awaiting a death penalty hearing for concealing the death and the murder of his girlfriend. But when that happened last year, and they found her body on my birthday, February the 10th, last year, and I vowed that I would try to speak out. There needs to be balance. I want to be able to preserve my right to carry a weapon, but I don't want to do it when it's going to put the most innocent of people who don't have the money to get here today because they don't have a car, they don't have gas, the people who are probably the most potential victims. I want for this law to protect them. If you're going to try to loosen the laws, then ultimately you're making it easier for people like my ex-husband to manipulate. You know, after he had many misdemeanors of violent offenses, terroristic threats, DUIs, he was still able to legally purchase assault weapons. Why? It's for intimidation. It gave him a sense of power. And it worked because I lived my life under the radar for over 20 years. Even after our divorce, I continued to have to go to court to pursue protection. There was nothing that I had that I could legally protect myself. And for somebody who committed so many crimes, who was obviously very violent, and by court order was not even allowed to be around his children without supervision, why is this person allowed to buy weapons? You know, that needs to be changed. You're not protecting the most innocent victim. And that's it. That's really my main point. And I ask that you guys very carefully consider the language in that to make sure that if you're going to try to preserve the right, that you balance it by protecting the most innocent.
Thank you, Shawn. Appreciate you coming up. Wayne Selling.
Good afternoon. My name is Wayne Sealing. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak about House Bill 875 today. Now you're going to hear from a guy that carries a gun. I support this bill because it takes great steps toward restoring our Second Amendment in Georgia. Last year I was able to speak about House Bill 512, but this year we have an even better bill that's been introduced and that the citizens of Georgia are in dire need of. With the passage of this bill into law, Georgia weapons license holders will be able to defend themselves and their loved ones in more locations. Additionally, private property rights will be restored to places of worship as well as bars. This is a needed change since both are entitled to the same rights as any other private property owner. Bartenders and designated drivers will no longer be in violation of the law for carrying firearms to defend themselves. We can look at the state of Utah as an example of a gun-friendly state. In Utah, it is legal to carry a firearm into places of worship, into bars, and on public college campuses. The violent crime rate in Georgia is 373.2 per 100,000 people, according to the FBI's most recent reporting. In Utah, the violent crime rate is 195 per 100,000 people. We see almost double the violent crime as the state of Utah does. The murder rate here in Georgia is almost double as Utah, and again, that's a significant difference. Allowing licensed gun holders to carry into more locations will result in a safer state, lower crime, and will also work toward restoring our individual right to bear arms. Now I'd like to say a quick word about campus carry too. There are currently only 21 states that have an outright ban on campus carry, with Georgia being one of them. We've fallen behind the curve and need to update our law to allow for campus carry. Although campus carry is not included in this bill per se, I think that it is important to note that limiting the fine to $100 and the protection from arrest for the offense of carrying a firearm on campus only applies to licensed holders. To receive the Georgia weapons license, there is a process that you have to go through that criminals simply just don't bother with. Criminals are going to carry on campus regardless of the law, unchecked. The only people that are concerned with the law are us law-abiding citizens and the people who obtain their GWLs, Georgia weapons licenses. These people are adults and are accepted as such in our society. Students face a very real threat while trying to become educated and better themselves. Campus security is inadequate, plain and simple, just inadequate. I encourage you to watch the testimony of Amanda Collins. She's from Nevada, and I really recommend you watch that. She speaks about how she was brutally assaulted within sight of the campus security office and could do nothing about it. She did not have her firearm on her even though she was a licensed holder because she was a law-abiding citizen trying to obey the law of her state. And the fact of the matter is, violent crime on Georgia campuses is happening. As a recent example, on February 1st, just 4 days ago, an armed robbery occurred on Georgia Tech's campus. Georgia Tech's own statistics show 2 rapes, 6 robberies, and 3 aggravated assaults in 2013 alone. And just remember, these are statistics from just one campus from 1 year alone. This is not acceptable, and to allow for these crimes to occur unchecked is irresponsible to say the least. Reducing the crime from a misdemeanor charge to a non-arrestable $100 offense is a small start for the students of our state, but it is a start. Remember that these students will be 21 and up, have undergone a background check, and have successfully received their weapons carry license. People who do not hold a weapons license will still be subject to the same current law as it's written. And there are many great changes coming with this bill. The bottom line is, though, that this bill is just right for the citizens of Georgia. The right thing may not always be the easy thing, but it's pretty clear in this case. There are numerous infringements on the Second Amendment that will be removed, and many freedoms that will be restored. I fully support this bill and ask that you do so as well. And I also wanted to point out a quick thing about the polls that keep being brought up about the 72% or 74% of people that oppose what's being proposed in this bill. Polls, number one, this is not a straight democracy. This is a democratic republic, meaning that we have a constitution that we look to for our Second Amendment right. Number two, polls can be skewed. The way that the polls ask the questions can vary the results. There was a separate poll for the exact same question actually done in Gilmer County, and in that poll it was 90% in favor of campus carry for students and 10% opposed. So you can't really just arbitrarily believe polls like that. But I guess that's it. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Thank you. I'm trying to get down to this so some folks who may not want to drive back in tomorrow can speak and we're really running past time. Charles Gregory, would you like to speak today? Representative Gregory?
Okay. A lot of good stuff in the bill. I like a lot of this. Good job. Much better than last year. I do have a question and a couple of concerns. First thing I'd like to bring up is line 147 through 162. And you kind of touched on this, but I'm still a little bit unclear. What would happen if a license holder entered a government building where ingress to such building is screened during business hours, but through an alternate ingress that is not screened? Would this license holder be guilty of misdemeanor? And if so, is that license holder immediately guilty of a misdemeanor, or are they afforded the opportunity to exit the building immediately upon notification, just as though he or she had failed to clear the security checkpoint? What's the intent here? And I think it should be made a little bit more clear. What is the intent? Well, just as an example, the Capitol here, they have two lines. Some people have to go through security, some people don't. What happens if somebody goes through the line that is non-secured and 2 hours later they say, oops, I forgot to put this in my car? I'd love it if that was made more clear in the language. I think that would make it a little bit better. Secondly, I share concerns over the mental health language as articulated by the National Association for Gun Rights. I'm not going to restate his testimony, but I urge you to consider very carefully the grave ramifications of having us hand over Georgia's citizens' outpatient mental health data to the federal government. And to reiterate a little bit about what the last gentleman was speaking about, the most glaring disappointment with this bill is the omission of the complete decriminalization and legalization of carrying a weapon on a college campus. We're still treating adult students and those who have occasion to traverse a college campus as second-class citizens. Contrary to popular belief and what our schools and media often try to brainwash into believing, we are not a democracy, we are a republic. Anyone who questions this should simply recite the Pledge of Allegiance and to the republic for which it stands. Our founders despised the idea of a democracy. They often referred to it as mob rule or tyranny of the majority. With the Declaration of Independence, and for the first time in history, its signers set course toward establishing a government of self-rule that recognizes all men are created equal, not in life outcome, but under natural law and respective to individual natural rights. As Thomas Jefferson said, our natural rights are the right to one's life, liberty, and property, as well as the tools for their defense. These rights don't originate from a king, dictator, or oligarchy. They are derived from nature or nature's God and must be protected from government. Our founders believed this so strongly that they staged a revolution to defend their natural rights from a tyrannical king. Natural rights are unalienable, and they are not subject to compromise or infringement by any government, and natural law always supersedes man-made law. Just like no one has the moral right to vote on repealing free speech or freedom of religion, there is no moral validity to the state's continued infringement on individual property rights and or the individual right to self-defense. We are in violation of natural law and the founding principles of this country. Every day we continue to enforce these types of morally invalid statutory laws. As such, I would encourage the committee to amend this bill so that it completely decriminalizes and legalizes carrying a weapon on a college campus. Barring these concerns and or the addition of any poison pills, the bulk of HB 807 would certainly be an improvement over current law. Thanks.
so much. Well, it appears that Representative Holcomb, it is you and I. Well, at this point, we don't. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a handful of folks left, and it is, we're about 40 minutes past time. Jamie Brownlee, is this something that you will be our last speaker, and then we'll take up with the rest on here tomorrow? Had to leave. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it has certainly been a pleasure, and I want to thank y'all for exercising your First Amendment rights.